Thank you, Janice and Josh. And now joining Alexis on stage is Michelle Nemits, Executive Director of Bay Area BioComm, Keith Yamamoto, Vice Chancellor for Science Policy and Strategy at UCSF, and Joaquín Torres, Director of the San Francisco Office of Economic and Workforce Development. Welcome, everyone.
Now you get the other side of my face. You can just pretend I'm another interviewer now on this side. So you've all been in the Bay for a while now, and the Bay has seen pretty explosive growth in the life sciences. Did you anticipate that this is what was going to happen? And what do you think has sort of guided this growth over the last, say, half decade to a decade?
I can start. So I don't know how much we really anticipated, but I can say that as chairman of the committee at UCSF that planned the Mission Bay campus,
you saw it coming, yeah.
Which was really, I don't know how many people knew that area before, but it was really kind of desolate, old warehouses, old railroads that had been retired, empty space. My faculty colleagues called me one afternoon and said, you know, we hear you're chairing this campus planning committee. Have you been down there? You know, do you know
like,
that?
No, shit. Exactly. I really should have done that.
You know that the San Francisco police are afraid to go there, you know. And we just thought we should let you know, as a close friend and colleague, that we've all talked and nobody's going to go. But the plan for Mission Bay was, in fact, to build a life science community. Not just to move a branch of the university there, not just to have more square feet, which quickly turned into more of not enough square feet, but really to build a broad community that really went stem to stern and recognized the fact that this was the moment, and this was about 2000 that we began construction of Mission Bay. First building opened, Genentech Hall, opened in 2003, so as almost 17 years ago. And the idea was that this was the moment in which bringing together all of the different stakeholders that had a play in life sciences would make a difference. Having proximity and bringing those groups together would lead to synergies that otherwise wouldn't exist. And so could we find a spot where we could really begin to build that? And that was the plan.
And was the example there Kendall Square, or was it somewhere here in the Bay?
Oh, I guess you could think of Kendall Square. We didn't really think of it that way. We really thought that we could develop something that was distinct and distinctive, that would capitalize upon the entrepreneurial spirit that characterizes the Bay Area, the kind of excitement of people in San Francisco doing something with real excellence and distinction. And of course, having Silicon Valley proximal was a plus as well.
Michelle, Joaquín, do you want to?
It's interesting. I mean, it was a bold move because there was nothing going on in San Francisco at all, basically, at that time. So Mission Bay was really a big move and a bold move. And it's turned out quite well, very successfully. I mean, it's different, I think. Tech has moved in quite a bit, so it hasn't fully realized the life science potential that it was dreamed about, I guess, in the beginning, but it's still quite successful. Many companies in San Francisco. I think what's interesting, I've been kicking around the life sciences industry in the Bay Area for 25 years. And I don't have a science background, so for those of you in the audience who don't have a science background who want to get into the life sciences, there's room for you as well. And I think that's another undertold story. But it's been interesting. You know, Genentech kind of started in South City. You had Cetus, which became Chiron over in Emeryville, kind of the nucleus or the nuclei of the industry in the Bay Area, and things growing up around it. But what's interesting, 25 years later, I don't think anyone could have predicted, how many companies there are. We do an economic impact report every year, and our latest one shows that there's over 2,700 life science companies in the Bay Area. And they're all over the Bay. They're not just in Mission Bay or South City or Emeryville, but they're really all over the Bay Area. And so I don't think anyone could have predicted that it would be what it is today. It's quite interesting. Tech has also grown up, in the same 40-year period, basically, that biotech has grown up. And so it's been really interesting to see more recently those two fields or industries converge. And you talked about a little bit about that in the previous panel, but that's also been really interesting and something nobody could have predicted.
There's actually a great book by Leslie Berlin, who's a historian down at Stanford, called Troublemakers, that brings together some of that history, kind of pointing out that Genentech, Atari, Apple are kind of all emerging from the same kind of stew, even though people think of those places very differently now.
I certainly think there was a great awareness around what the potential would be in Mission Bay, but certainly not an awareness that it was actually going to be possible. I think everyone's been pleasantly surprised that you'd be able to kind of create that level of life science ecosystem that's prevalent right now today and also growing throughout the city.
Yeah. And, given this growth, it's kind of hard to say, like, oh, well, what are the challenges or what's not working, right? And some of the other places that, like, I did one of these up in Seattle, and people can, like, very easily identify the problem. And it's usually something like, we don't have enough venture capital here, I mean, that's, like, the basic thing that people tend to say elsewhere, outside the Bay. Well, not something anyone says in the Bay, actually. We don't have enough venture capital. It's not something you hear here. And my question, I guess, is, are there limits on this growth? And will whether it's either the adjacent industries, housing affordability crisis, what is it? What actually holds you back? Or can this just kind of keep going, actually?
Well, so what we're seeing right now, and I think it's prevalent not only to life sciences, but to businesses of all kinds across the city, are just those two things, cost and space. It's pretty basic and pretty simple. Which is why it's so important that as the city undergoes current zoning plans or rezoning of areas, that we're being very particular about where does creativity and flexibility exist to increase the amount of space that's available for life sciences and other businesses as well, which is why the BioComm advocacy work is so important to making sure that people are educated about the things that most policymakers in San Francisco may not understand in terms of even ones who represent large swaths of the community, and the need to have that education constantly being brought to the table so the policymakers can really be thinking about what makes San Francisco so special, why is this particular industry so important to our livelihoods, to the intellectual capital of the city and the region as well.
I would agree with that. I think that and build on a little bit. Just to put a pretty sharp point on this, when Mission Bay was being planned and built, the Bay Area, which was really ground zero for biotech, had 0 biotech companies within the city limits of San Francisco, 0. And so the city did things that enabled the build out of Mission Bay. It zoned the 60 acres around the UCSF plot for to be welcoming to biotech. And that made a huge difference. And now as Michelle said, there are hundreds of companies within the city limits and thousands in the Bay Area. And so that has really worked. So now looking forward, where do we go? Yes, it's true that the cost of living, housing costs are limiting. It's tough to recruit people from outside of the Bay Area into San Francisco, even within the Bay Area into San Francisco. It's become more challenging. But I think the other side of that is that we have a responsibility that Michelle is really making operational, which is to educate the people of San Francisco and the Bay Area about what the values are that these technologies can bring, and do it in a way that they really feel that they own it. One of the things that one of the kind of organizing principles of UCSF is precision medicine, which is really has as its core building a integrated continuum of not just research and practice, but in fact having the citizens who actually can make use of these technologies, who gain from it, understand it enough that they really feel that they own it, that they're a part of it. And I think if we don't do that, if we don't kind of bring the excitement and potential outcomes of these technologies to the people in the way that they feel it's part of them, then I think it's going to be hard for us to continue to move forward.
I think one of the crucial questions that it seems like everybody in this area is asking about all of our large industries, but in particular big tech, and I think the same kinds of questions apply to biotech, is should cities be supporting these industries when they have other priorities, and are these industries actually increasing inequality within these areas? Do you think that the growth of the biotech industry has contributed meaningfully to the inequality that we see both within the city of San Francisco as well as in sort of 9-county Bay region?
I guess I would look at it a different way. I would say that we have a responsibility as policymakers to be mindful of the effects that any policy we choose to make has on the quality of life and addressing issues of inequality, income inequality, the price of our neighborhoods, the price of the cost of goods and services throughout the city, and being mindful of every single step that we take to address that. I don't think it's been any one major stroke that's created the situation that's created so much pressure here in San Francisco. Certainly it's very easy to kind of have a snap of the fingers blame game about who is responsible, why, and when. But the reality is, and we were talking about this earlier in terms of the decades and decades and decades of unmindfulness in terms of what certain decisions we're making based on a very valid value system about what we would or would not allow in our communities, has only exacerbated the pressures that we're feeling in the city today. We're beginning to make those changes now. We're beginning to actually see the fruits of some planning efforts that began a decade ago, albeit I believe anyway, a little bit too late, to kind of catch up with the momentum and infusion of cash and infrastructure needs that we have in the city. But we're certainly moving in the right direction on those lines. What's mind-boggling to me right now, and frustrating to so many of us who might have walked here or been on public transit to get here or been caught in congestion in the city, are just those very basic infrastructure issues that we have to deal with very specifically that also address those inequality issues as well.
Well, let me make it a little more specific. You know, you've got Mission Bay that's kind of sitting on this side close into the city, and we have South San Francisco, which has a bunch of other companies. And sitting in between those places, Bayview Hunters Point, one of like the crucial, kind of the last big black neighborhood in San Francisco. What is the responsibility of the biotech industry to that neighborhood? And like, how do we think about that?
Well, certainly. I mean, I think when you see the increase in STEM graduates at universities in the Greater Bay Area increasing by 80%, I believe, from 2012 to 2017, and you think about the representation of African American youth who are actually involved in those programs, and the reality, are they seeing themselves represented within the industry? I would say that they are probably not. Being somebody who spends a lot of time in the Bayview Hunters Point, I also serve on the Housing Authority Commission, responsible for overseeing a lot of the development that's taking place there, replacement issues. I think we absolutely need to have more integration of the biotech and life sciences and tech within our communities, and recognizing there's a responsibility there as well. Have we seen enough? Absolutely not. Which is one of the reasons, Mayor Breed has created her Opportunities for All program, trying to do very simple things to build awareness for the youth of the city, so that we can maintain this global excellence that we have, while at the same time being very locally focused about the opportunities that we want our youth, and particularly our communities of color, to have. Whether you talk about the Bayview, whether you talk about Visitation Valley, the OMI, the Lakeside, the Mission, Chinatown, the Outer Richmond, the Outer Sunset, all those places with very specific attention to zip codes. You would be surprised at how much more attention we need, not only in the southeast sector, but other areas of the city as well.
So this is an area that really harkens back to the question that was asked earlier about what are we doing about understanding the social determinants of health and disease. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, a prime element of precision medicine, and it says we have to be able to pull together all of the information in ways that we can go beyond what scientists have acknowledged for a long time, and that is, social determinants, they have a big play. Mm-hmm. And then that's the end of the discussion. We go back to the running gels. And so one of the experiments that we're doing in UCSF's precision medicine platform is something called SFCAN, San Francisco Cancer Action Network, or something like that, which recognizes and acknowledges the fact that as you move from zip code to zip code across San Francisco, there are twofold and sometimes larger than twofold disparities in the frequencies of even the 5 most common cancers. Mm-hmm. And so we really want to understand that. And so we're trying to make San Francisco into basically a cancer study laboratory, right, in which we can begin to collect information, data, about the people that occupy these different zip codes and try to understand what the sources of the disparities are. This is a big change. Classically, clinical trials have been done by done on European men. And so we don't really know. There's a huge amount that we don't know about what's driving these differences. I think this is an area of responsibility that if it's understood by the people in San Francisco, they can begin to feel like this is about them. They own this process as well. And I think it's something that we really have to do.
Yeah, I would just add that I think it's an opportunity for the industry to really get out into the communities more so the communities can understand what's there and what opportunities exist. For example, the people in Hunters Point or other maybe underserved neighborhoods. Some of the bigger companies are doing a really good job of working with their cities. I would say Genentech is a great example. Bayer in Berkeley is a great example. Beringer Ingelheim down in Fremont. There's some really good examples, Baxter and Hayward, of companies really engaging with their communities and being proactive in terms of supporting STEM education and community parks and community development and things like that. So there are some things that the industry is doing. That said, I think the biotech industry in the Bay Area, as big as it is, as well funded as it is, as innovative and amazing as it is, and it is all those things, it's in the shadow of tech. And I think it often gets overlooked and people just aren't aware of it. People that aren't in the industry aren't even aware of what is here and how big and important it is to their daily lives and to the general regional economy. So I think—
Are you saying we should be asking you for more housing money? Is that what you're saying?
I think biotech, the industry needs to be promoting itself more. I think it's doing amazing things, and people just don't know what's happening here. They don't know how much is here. It's kind of in the shadow of tech, I think, is my perception.
Let's take a couple questions.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Regina Walton, and I lead SF Tech for Good, and that's a big community where we talk about how technology is being used for social change. And my question is this, I'm also a type 1 diabetic. So what are biotech companies doing to get out there with communities? Like, for example, I'm in a type 1 group. Kaiser Oakland provides a room for us. When I plan events, I approach startups, but I have a friend that works for Genentech, but biotech companies really haven't inserted themselves into the communities like proactively. And I know that as a community organizer, there are a lot of groups out there that would love to come in and use your facilities from like 6 to 9 to bring in the community to maybe talk about type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, all cancer, all these different things that we're all dealing with on a daily basis. All right, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take it. I can't see where the question came from. I'm sorry. Oh, there you are. The light's in my eye. I can't see. But I would love to talk with you afterwards. I think some of the bigger companies in particular would be really interested in engaging in some of these things. And they do a lot of engagement. They have foundations, and they are engaged in a number of ways already. But there's certainly an opportunity to do more. BioComm, so what BioComm is, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but we are a life science trade association. So we do a lot of things to support the industry and to connect the industry to policymakers and communities and other resources in the local area. So that's an area where we might be able to work with your organization to get the word out to the community, to the companies in the industry, large and small. There's a lot of small companies who really like to engage with the communities. They like to do. They like to provide opportunities for their employees to engage with the community on a volunteer basis. They like to take interns inside to learn about what the life science industry is. So I think there's a lot of ways to work together potentially.
Do we have another one? I thought we... Oh, too late, sorry.
Hi, my name is Cohen, and I do discipline health policy work. And one of the challenges I see within the tech industry is that we often don't think of the end game with the payers, particularly around Medicare and Medicare. And so the wonderful innovations are developed are not accessible to the public. So what is the role of cities and counties in which they're supporting these programs with government dollars to bring payers together and to bring patients together to implement and test some of these amazing technologies that are being developed with public money in some cases?
I can answer it more generally, and then Keith can jump in. But it was something that applies not only to medical investments or investments that municipalities or the state provides for those services, but any service, and the real need for additional integration across bureaucracies, across departments, in partnership with community-based organizations to really do that work and get that direct feedback. Even in talking about new investments that have been made to support the Earned Income Tax Credit Program or the census work that's being done this year. Those very specific community-based efforts that certainly biotech can support as well. I think it's that kind of level of granular day-to-day work that has to happen at the ground level to support those efforts.
And I agree, and I'll just add to that briefly that the San Francisco General Hospital, which is one of our UCSF's teaching hospitals to the faculty or the staff around faculty, really accepts all comers and doesn't limit the use of technologies, expensive technologies, to be able to treat and hopefully cure patients that come in, whether they have insurance, whether they have money. It doesn't really matter. I think it's one of the responsibilities that we have that we need to be able to play out within the community and make sure that people understand that. The wrestling with the payer side of the enterprise is really fraught. Not just in terms of who's getting reimbursed for what, but the larger questions that are coming at us as technologies develop of who's going to get access to those technologies. How will that play out? Are we making good decisions? And then the whole privacy and security measures. As soon as your genome is sequenced, that is the unique identifier for individuals. And any piece of information that's tied to that is going to become vulnerable. None of us in the room believe that things can be completely secure. So how do we deal with that? It's a good social issue.
Did you get your genome sequenced? Have you gotten it sequenced?
Sorry?
Have you gotten your genome sequenced?
Not the whole. No, I've done 23andMe.
Let's do one last question right here. Yeah.
My questions kind of got dealt with before, but you're talking about big data involving the community, so on and so forth. But it seems like whenever one of these cutting-edge therapeutic interventions gets introduced, there's also an astronomical cost associated with it. Part of that is, trying to recoup costs of being cited in San Francisco, various other things. But I'm just kind of curious about this issue about access, about just equal access to these new technologies.
And I'll even expand it like a little bit is, we talked about product market fit here, but that's like a pretty different thing, like within the biotech world. And are these markets like, if that's the model we're going to use to deliver healthcare in this country, are they do you think they're working for your companies or your realm?
I'll say.
Just a quick answer here at the end.
I think the pharma model, the big pharma model, is dead. I think it is unsustainable. What drives the costs of these drugs? What drives the costs of drugs is not, in fact, the kind of experiment by experiment costs of doing the basic research and the clinical trials. It is, in fact, the cost of that, plus the cost of all the drugs that failed. Right. The only way that drug companies make money, right, is to cover their costs of the drugs that the FDA approves, because that's where the money comes from, and to cover the costs of all the things that didn't make it. One failed phase 3 trial, you're talking about, $1 billion. And so what if we knew more about how diseases work, what the mechanisms are, and so we could catch them earlier. You know, people with neurological disease where the symptoms don't show up until age 70, and by then it's too late. There's something going on very early that we just don't understand. So if we can understand those things better, then I think we've got a shot at really bringing down the costs of trials. We could define trial cohorts better. They'd be smaller, faster trials, and we would understand what's going on in ways that are important. The other way that the pharma model fails is that there's not going to be any more blockbuster drugs. There's not going to be any more drugs that work on everybody. As we understand disease better, we're going to understand that, in fact, all diseases are rare diseases. And so the model of building a drug that everybody will buy has worked as long as we don't understand who the people are that it works on and who the people are that it doesn't work on. So a blockbuster drug is merely a drug that doesn't kill anybody, right? And then everybody can buy it, right? But as we understand things better, that's going to go away. The payers will stop reimbursing for the patients that it's not going to work for. They'll stop reimbursing for clinical tests that aren't useful for that patient. So those are things that will begin to bring the drugs costs, begin to bring healthcare costs down. But drug companies are going to have to understand that the way they've been operating is no longer going to work.
I think we're going to end it there. Thank you so much. Interesting answer.